did so far. Um, we did, um, we started, I'm always sort of reminding you and myself and everyone, when it comes to the book of Acts, the first chapter, the first verse is sort of laying out a plan because Luke starts with uh, what Jesus began both to do and teach. So Luke is writing his first book. We said that his gospel and the book of Acts is actually one work or one book in volumes. And so he says that the former account I made of Theophilus of all that Jesus began both to do and teach. So Jesus has begun something, he began something, and then his disciples are now continuing that. And we see the same idea in the Gospel of John when Jesus says, who believes in me will perform acts, or we will do the same things I'm doing, and even greater miracles will they do. And when you think about it, really, I mean, where was Jesus going? From Galilee to Judea, which is some 30, 40 k's from one end to the other. And like you're going from Wollongong to Kayama or something like that. That's the area that Jesus covered. Yeah, it's a small area. The Holy Land isn't really, there is many wars and many fuss about it, but it's a small area, it's a small country. Um, and so that's what Jesus covered. And it's true that, his disciples have continued and performed even greater miracles than Jesus himself. And how many people were listening to Jesus? Few thousand people? Whereas now you have billions of people have heard about that. So it's just miraculous what was happening. And that's why I'm always sort of emphasizing that the Jesus began, not that Luke is starting this, so it's important for Luke. Why am I saying this? Because this is going to shed the light on our last chapter, on wrapping up this book of Acts, because it might sort of seem to you, oh, this isn't really logical how the book of Acts finishes, but we'll come to that. We'll come to that. So please bear in mind, how is this book of Acts opening up? That Luke is starting by, oh, the former account I made to you, of Theophilus, of what Jesus began both to do and teach. Okay. And then we have everything sort of opening up, how he's laying out a plan for them, that they're going to be, that the disciples are going to be his witnesses, and they were, and how human factor was influencing there, how Peter had this idea that there has to be this 12th apostle that needs to be chosen by them, and they throw dice. It means they couldn't actually agree who's going to be the 12th. So Justus and Matthias were two of them, and then you have, they choose Matthias, but you see in the Orthodox iconography, not just in the Orthodox iconography, you can choose that the whole book of Acts is actually, well, not the whole, but it is. The whole book of Acts is actually the 12th apostle is Paul. So what men have decided doesn't necessarily goes with along what God has chosen. So God is actually choosing Paul, and we can see that very clearly in Orthodox iconography. Wherever you see the icon of Pentecost, you can't see Matthias there, but you can see Paul, even though historically Paul wasn't there when the Holy Spirit descended upon the apostles, but he definitely has sort of earned himself this spot as the 12th, or the icon of ascension when Jesus is ascending. It's also Paul that you're going to see there. You're not going to see Matthias. You'll see 12 figures there, 12 apostles on both of these events and both of these icons, and you're always going to see Paul there. Okay, so we're now following Paul. He went on his three missionary journeys. He's always sort of trying to be in Jerusalem. He's going to Jerusalem for major feast days. And it's very important to have this sort of idea, because we sort of have this idea that there were two religions, that you have Judaism and Christianity. And when we say conversion of Paul, we're meaning we sort of have somehow in our heads, oh, well, Paul has left Judaism and has become Christian, and he has joined this new religion called Christianity. Well, the whole book of Acts is saying, actually, no, that's not what it is. There is no two religions. There is no Judaism and Christianity. Paul is saying the Messiah has come. The everything in the Old Testament, what was promised before, now is being fulfilled. Now it's being fulfilled. And Paul now uses every opportunity to preach and to say that. And you've seen on his missionary journeys, when he comes to a certain city, where does he go? The first place he goes is a synagogue, so the gathering place of Jews. Okay, so that's very important to remember that Christianity is not this brand new religion, but because all of them are Jews. Like Paul is a Jew, Jesus is a Jew, all of the apostles, everyone. Luke, who writes this, is also a Hellenized Jew. He writes in Greek and so on, and his language is beautiful, but he's a Jew, and we know that. So there isn't this new religion. Christians will be expelled, thrown out of the synagogues, probably sometimes in the second century. But you have Christian synagogues, and you have people gathering, everyone gathering pretty much on Sabbath day, which is Saturday, and then Christians coming only on Sunday to do the Eucharist. And that's why when Christians were expelled from synagogues, you have the liturgy, our liturgy, the Orthodox liturgy, joining these two things together. And even now, for the Orthodox Church, two major liturgical days are actually Saturday and Sunday. It's not just Sunday, it's Saturday and Sunday. So that's very important to sort of note here. All right, we'll continue on chapter 25. So far, we've come to that point where Paul is in Jerusalem. He's captured. He's going into sort of house captivity where he has certain freedom. He's not tied in chains because he's a Roman citizen. So he can receive visitors. He can send letters, and he stays here for 2 years. Most of his letters later on, if you're sort of perseverant and we go through his letters or his epistles to other churches, were actually written in this period when he was captured, and the time he spent in jail, actually in Judea, right? So we see that Felix is one of the he's a governor. They're now in Caesarea. He was moved from Jerusalem because he was in grave danger that his own Jews are going to kill him. So he was moved from Jerusalem to Caesarea. Okay, all right. So we continue. Felix was the governor at that time, but then a new governor is coming. His name is Festus, okay? But Felix, even though he was married with a Jew woman, he wanted to do a favor to Jews and left Paul in prison, okay? And that's where we have left last Tuesday. So now we're continuing. Okay, chapter 25. Now when Festus had come to the province, after 3 days he went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. And then the high priest and the chief men of the Jews informed him against Paul, and they petitioned him, asking a favor against him, that he would summon him to Jerusalem, while they lay in ambush along the road to kill him. But Festus answered, and so we can see here, you remember from last time, that we said that the certain Jews have actually made a vow that they will neither eat or drink until they kill Paul. So they were so they died. Okay, they starved. True. Okay. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea and that he himself was going there shortly. Therefore he said, "Let those who have authority among you go down with me and accuse this man." to see if there is any fault in him. And when he had remained among them more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, he commanded Paul to be brought. When he had come, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood about and laid many serious complaints against Paul, which they could not prove, while he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offended in anything at all. So again, we see Paul, we see them attacking Paul, and they want to accuse him, and he's sort of defending himself. We've seen last time how the high priests have actually brought their own speaker or their own lawyer, solicitor, to speak on their behalf, who was sort of very versed in Greek philosophy. He was sort of very versed in orations, and he's delivering a speech for them. And people sort of loved that at that time, because mind you, there is no social media, there's no Instagram, there's no Facebook, there's no TV, nothing. So people would gather on these sort of these sort of events, and they would love to listen to people who speak well. And so someone who was really educated at that time would be very versed in terms of, he would be in terms of public speaking. So he would have to know what's a good what we now call public speaking. Okay, and Paul knew that. So we see that Paul is very educated, not just in Jewish traditions and Jewish law, in the law of God, but he also knows philosophy. He also knows orations. He also knows how to deliver a speech. He knows Greek. So and we've seen how people are actually surprised when he starts speaking Greek. Okay. All right. And he says, no, I'm not guilty. I haven't offended the Jews. I haven't offended the temple. I haven't offended Caesar. Nothing. Okay. So Festus, who is the governor at that time, we're continuing, wanting to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me concerning these things? So Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews I have done nothing wrong, as you very well know. For if I am an offender or have committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying. But if there is nothing in these things in which these men accuse me, no one can deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar. So he knows, we've seen that Paul has a sister, and his sister has a son, so that's Paul's nephew, who was close to Jews. We've seen that in the last chapter. He heard that they want to kill Paul. And Paul knows that, and he doesn't want to go to Jerusalem, even though it's very clear for Paul. It's very clear, and he says this here, I do not object to dying. And that's not the first time we hear Paul that says, I don't care if I die, because he will say many times that he's willing and prepared to die for Christ, because that's the first thing in his life. The gospel of Christ and Christ himself, who has revealed to him, and he's seen Christ. He has sent, Christ has sent Paul to do on this mission. And so Paul is not afraid of dying. He's not afraid of death. His goal, however, and we see this, is to go to Caesar. Now, he wants to go to Caesar. At that time, whoever was a Roman citizen had this right to appealing to Caesar, but Caesar would rarely actually, Caesar, who is the emperor, would rarely see himself anyone. Like, he wouldn't just be, so he would send someone in. So people would go to Rome, Roman citizens across the Roman Empire would be sent to Rome itself if they appealed to Caesar. But then Caesar had his own representatives who would be judging on various matters, whatever was the case. Also, I need to sort of remind you, or to let you know, or to inform you that that Roman law was a huge advantage to anything that has ever existed in the whole wide world. So you had the rule of law, and this is the first time in the history of humankind that you actually have law functioning for those who are Roman citizens. Okay? Those who weren't Roman citizens, as we said, they were treated like animals, like cattle, like any sort of, you had slavery, you had all of that. But those who were Roman citizens, you could not actually just kill them anywhere or to judge them against, in front of any sort of court. So they had this right of appellation, and so they could go to Rome to have a fair judgment. So there was this fair judgment. That's why if anyone is studying law or wants to study law, you would have to go sort of to study Roman law. And that's still a basic for even law in Australia or anywhere in the Western world. Roman law is still sort of this basic underlying grounding sort of ground, yeah, for any law, because it worked actually. Okay, so he appeals to Caesar, and he shall go to Caesar. Okay, verse 13. And after some days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea to greet Festus. Okay. Agrippa, who's Agrippa now? King Agrippa is one of the tetrarchs. He is a grandson of Herod the Great, who built the temple in Jerusalem. So he was very powerful, sort of powerful. He's called Herod the Great, but he held the whole Judea and Galilee and that whole area as a king under Roman authority. Okay, so Romans sort of had these little kings that were ruling in their own right, as long as they sort of acknowledged the highest authority, and they gave sort of the highest power to Rome. And so Herod he wasn't even Jew, as we know, but he built a Jewish temple. And then Romans sort of saw that he's very powerful, and what they decided is that they decided to split his kingdom into four. And so you have Herod the Tetrarch, who was just governing and ruling over one quarter. Tetra means quarter. And so he was just governing one quarter of what Herod the Great was governing. And now Agrippa is also one of the tetrarchs. He's a grandson of Herod the Great, who built the temple. Okay, so just sort of a little bit, if that makes sense to you, who is Agrippa. So King Agrippa came to Caesarea to greet Festus. He's coming there because Festus is a Roman governor. So he's the representative of the highest Roman government in this area, and he's coming sort of to pay his respect and to give those accreditation letters and whatnot was sort of the principle at that time. When they had been there many days, Festus laid Paul's seized before the king, saying, "There is a certain man left a prisoner by Felix, about whom the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me when I was in Jerusalem, asking for a judgment against him. To them I answered, it is not the custom of the Romans to deliver any man to destruction before the accused meets the accusers face to face and has opportunity to answer for himself concerning the charge against him." Okay, so Festus is a Roman governor. This is now sort of proving that the Roman legal system is working. So they're not going to accuse and put someone to death before there is a proper sort of case going there. So, and Agrippa comes, and Agrippa is a Jew, sort of a Jew, knows the Jewish customs and so on. And Festus, being a new governor, he's presenting this case to Agrippa, hoping that he will sort of help him because, all right, well, this former governor sort of left this prisoner here, and he's here for 2 years. I don't know what to do with him, so please help me if you can. That's what he's saying. All right? Therefore, when they had come together without any delay, the next day I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought in. When the accusers stood up, they brought no accusation against him of such things as I supposed. So we see Festus. He's totally. He's got no idea what to do with Paul because he doesn't know any sort of Jewish custom. He doesn't see that Paul has done anything wrong in the eyes of the Roman law. He's not going against Caesar. He's not a political rebel. He's not rebelling against the Roman Empire or anything like that. He sees no problem with Paul. So that's why Paul is there for 2 years, by the way. So because no one can actually say, well, what's happening here? So he says that. Anyways, we see here that Festus has no idea what to do with Paul. Okay. Um, but some, all right, let's just read the whole sentence. When the accusers stood up, they brought no accusations against him against him of such things as I supposed, but had some questions against him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who had died, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. Now we can see Festus is totally puzzled. He's got no idea what's happening. So he's like, there's something about their religion, and then about some Jesus, some guy who they said they killed him, but then Paul says he's alive. Well, what's that got to do with anything? Like he's got no idea what's happening here. So that's why he's sort of saying this to Agrippa. Like you should know something about this. I've got no idea what's happening here. And because I was uncertain of such things, so in other words, he's saying, I've got no idea. I've got this. I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there be judged concerning these matters. But when Paul appealed to be reserved for the decision of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I could send him to Caesar. So, decision of Augustus. We could see here one of the titles of the Roman emperor. So we know that the title Caesar is actually one of the names of Julius Caesar, but Caesar is actually a family name. You know what's the real name of Caesar, of Julius Caesar? Romans had 4 names, by the way. So his name is Gaius Julius Caesar. So his first name was Gaius, but no one called him like that. So Romans would have first name, then the family name, and then they would have father's name and grandfather's name. So they would have like 4 names. So that was sort of their custom. Okay, and so we see here one of the titles is Augustus, because Augustus was one of the greatest Roman emperors ever. And so emperors after him, at this time, emperor was Caligula, if I'm not wrong. So Paul wanted to go to see Caligula, one of the worst Roman emperors in the history. Because sorry? Insane. He was insane. So he accused the Jews, accused Christians, and then he burned them. Well, Nero burned them, but then Caligula was totally, he was insane. He was killing people for fun and for pleasure. So, and he was very famous for that. Like he was mad, like with the diagnosis, madman. So, like if they knew at that time who was mad, that Caligula was mad. All right. So we see here Festus as a governor doesn't know what to do. He's asking Agrippa, the king, to help him. And then Agrippa said to Festus, I also would like to hear the man myself. So Agrippa is amused. All right. Tomorrow, he said, you shall hear him. So the next day, when Agrippa and Bernice had come with their pomp and had entered the auditorium with the commanders and the prominent men of the city, at Festus' command, Paul was brought in. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all the men who are here present with us, you see this man about whom the whole assembly of the Jews petitioned me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying out that he was not fit to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing deserving of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I decided to send him. I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him. So he's saying here, because he's there on the judgment seat, so he's sort of a judge, and do you see the problem here with Festus? He has to, because he decided to send Paul to Rome, he has to write a letter to Rome. And he's desperate because he doesn't know what to write to Rome. Like, I can't see anything wrong with this man. They have accused him of mentioning something about their religion and some guy that's dead and he's claiming that he's not dead. What's happening here? So that's why he needs help, all right? And he's saying, I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him. Therefore, I have brought him out before you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the examination had taken place, I may have something to write. He needs to write something to Rome. So, because a prisoner, when someone would appeal to be sent to Rome, he would be assigned some soldiers, and so soldiers would take him on a boat, and probably, you would usually have to pay your way to Rome, or but if you're a soldier, they would probably force the trade because they would trading boats and so on. So the soldiers would probably just force you to take this prisoner and these soldiers and feed them for free and travel for free. So no one would pay nothing. That's it. Or else you would be killed. That's how it worked. All right. So he needs to write something. Therefore, I have brought him out before you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the examination has taken place, I may have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable to send a prisoner and not to specify the charges against him. So he knows nothing about this. Okay, chapter 26, we're moving on. Then Agrippa said to Paul, "You are permitted to speak for yourself." So Paul stretched out his hand and answered for himself. All right. So Paul stretched out his hand. So, like all the wogs, if you've seen wogs, they talk with hands. So Paul was hand talking, obviously, a lot. So much so that Luke is writing this here. All right. All right. And this is how Paul starts. So Paul stretched out his hand and answered for himself. I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because today I shall answer for myself before you concerning all the things of which I am accused by the Jews, especially because you are expert in all customs and questions which have to do with the Jews. Therefore, I beg you to hear me patiently. Okay. Paul is an excellent orator. He is an excellent orator. So so you have so many, you see how Agrippa has entered the auditorium with all the dignitaries, with all the people. So people wanted to be there, as I told you. There's no movies, there's no TV, there's no radio, nothing. People were wanting to see this. And so court cases were open in Rome, like today in Australia. Like you can go into any sort of courtroom and hear any case. So it was public. And so Paul starts this by sort of not sucking up to Agrippa, but this is how you would, when you read any sort of public speeches, you would first start by establishing some sort of a relationship with the person you're talking to. So, so in a way, so I scratch your backs, you scratch my backs, maybe something like that. But it's not like that. But only it's in order to establish a relationship. So that's why he's praising himself and says, "I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because today I shall answer for myself before you concerning all the things which I'm accused by the Jews." And he's saying to him, "You're an expert in all things But Agrippa is, of course, not an expert, but he lives there. He knows something. He knows something. He knows much more than Festus knows. So all right. So that's good. Okay. All right. Verse 4. My manner of life from my youth, which was spent from the beginning among my own nation at Jerusalem, all the Jews know. So he's saying, the way I've lived, everyone knows that. Okay? They knew me from the first, if they were willing to testify that according to the strictest sect of our religion, I lived a Pharisee. So he says, I'm a Pharisee. They know me. You ask them around, if they're willing to testify, they know who I am. I'm a Pharisee. And now but you see, if you remember the former case that happened in Jerusalem, in front of the Sanhedrin, where you had two parties of Jews. So this was only in front of the Jews. We had Sadducees, which were priestly order, high priest and the priestly order, and you had Pharisees. When Paul does not say, I was a Pharisee, he says, I am a Pharisee. So Paul knows exactly what to say to a certain audience. All right. So that's one thing. But he says, here he's using past tense. Now I stand and am judged for the hope of the promise made by God to our fathers. To this promise, our 12 tribes, earnestly serving God night and day, hope to attain. For this hope's sake, King Agrippa, I am accused by the Jews. Why should it be thought incredible by you that God raises the dead? Okay. Now, we see here time and again, this is the hope of the Old Testament, of the Torah, of the 5 books of Moses, of the whole law. This was promised. The Messiah was promised, and he has come now. This is what Paul is saying. This is the hope of the promise, and the promise is now being fulfilled. It's fulfilled now. Everything has changed. Everything has changed radically, and he's going to say for himself and for the entire world. Okay? And then he says, now he starts talking about resurrection. Why should it be thought incredible by you that God raises the dead? Indeed, I myself thought I must do many things contrary to the name of Jesus of Nazareth. This I also did in Jerusalem, and many of the saints I shut up in prison. You see that having received authority from the chief priests, and when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. You see, Paul is confessing now here. He's saying, I was a Pharisee. I received letters from the high priest to persecute Christians, to kill Christians. I was doing that. I was persecuting, I was killing Christians myself. Okay? And I punished them often in every synagogue, we continue, and compelled them to blaspheme. And being exceedingly enraged against them, I persecute them even to foreign cities. So we see here how he says blaspheme. And I punish them often in every synagogue and compel them to blaspheme, which means to say that Jesus is not the Messiah. That's the blasphemy, right? But you see, he does not believe that anymore. Okay, we're going to see that. While thus occupied, as I journeyed, so meaning while I was doing that very same thing, as I journeyed to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief priest, at midday, O king, along the road I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, shining around me and those who journeyed with me. And when we all had fallen to the ground, I heard a voice speaking to me and saying in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. All right. So this is a new detail. We haven't heard this. It is hard for you to kick against the goads. A goad is, all right, I'm going to be very visual. You have a cart that the oxen would pull, and so you have that. So from the goad, you have one sort of a pole going in the center, and you would have one oxen on one side, the other on the other side, and they would be tied to that goad, to that sort of a pole that was stick to the cart. And so when an oxen or any sort of animal that was sort of pulling that cart would start to kick against it, it wouldn't be able to because it was stuck against that. And so that was very clear for people who lived up until 100 years ago, because everyone had that. But I sort of, do you understand what does that mean? So the animal would be stuck against it, so it wouldn't be able to go anywhere else, but where that goad was leading the animal. Okay.
Is it the same thing as the yoke?
No, the yoke goes around the shoulders. That's above that. The goat sort of goes.
They do the same thing.
That would help, yeah. But then the animal would kick against it with their legs. But then that would, because it goes from the wheels down all the way in that sort of knee high of the animal, that would prevent the animal to walk anywhere on the side. Yeah. All right. And the yoke would go above that, and then it would be also tied to the cart or to the cart. Okay. So we hear a new detail here. It is hard for you to kick against the goads. So I said, who are you, Lord? And he said, I'm Jesus, whom you're persecuting. But rise and stand on your feet. For I have appeared to you for this purpose, to make you a minister and a witness both of the things which you have seen and of the things which I will yet reveal to you. I will deliver you from the Jewish people, as well as from the Gentiles, to whom I now send you, to open their eyes in order to turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, and that they may receive forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those who are sanctified by faith in me. So we see that Paul has received what Paul is doing. He's confessing here that he has received this from God, from Jesus. Jesus had appeared to him. He's really now, this is really a conversion. He's now turned, 180 degrees from being an enemy of Christians, persecuting Christians, having letters from the high priest. He now becomes a servant of Jesus Christ. And he will start many of his epistles or letters, Paul, the servant of Jesus Christ, or the better translation is the slave of Jesus Christ. Okay. Therefore, King Agrippa.
Pardon. Sorry, can we just add Bushka in, please?
Yeah, I've just seen that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's continue verse 19. Therefore, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision, but declare first to those in Damascus and in Jerusalem and throughout all the region of Judea, and then to the Gentiles, that they should repent, turn to God, and do works befitting repentance. For these reasons, the Jews seized me in the temple and tried to kill me. Therefore, having obtained help from God, to this day I stand witnessing both to small and great, saying no other things than those which the prophets and Moses said would come, that the Christ would suffer, that he would be the first to rise from the dead, and would proclaim light to Jewish people and to the Gentiles. So we can see here that Paul is saying, this is what was always to happen. He says that, I stand witnessing both to small and great, saying no other things than those which the prophets and Moses said would come. So that's what it is. It was promised. This is the same thing that these high priests and these Pharisees, everyone knows that this was said that it's going to happen. Okay? All right, let's continue. Verse 24. Now as he thus made his defense, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, you are beside yourself. Much learning is driving you mad. So we can see here that Festus really, he can't understand this. Like all of this religious stuff, he just couldn't, he couldn't care less. Like he can't put, Festus is just looking for something to write in the letter to send him to Rome. So, and he can't put this in the letter. Like, what's this? You're crazy. You're totally mad. I can't. There's no, because it doesn't make any sense for him. Like, he doesn't know the scriptures. He doesn't know Jewish customs. He doesn't know the religion. Nothing. That's totally crazy for him. And he's speaking about resurrection and what was promised to the fathers and to Moses. He doesn't know anything about that.
Would he have been just pagan or just didn't care about any of it?
He was a pagan. Yeah, he was a Roman governor of Judea. That's what it is. Yeah. But he said, I'm not mad. Paul said now. Paul responds. But he said, I'm not mad, most noble Festus, but speak the words of truth and reason. For the king before whom I also speak freely knows these things. For I'm convinced that none of these things escapes his attention, since this thing was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know that you do believe. So he's a great orator. So that's right. So he said, well, King Agrippa, do you believe in prophets? I know you believe in prophets. Like he's really good in this, okay? Then Agrippa said to Paul, you almost persuade me to become a Christian. And Paul said, I would to go. Now you see here why Paul loves these court cases, because this is an opportunity to speak publicly. This is, as I said, and there is so many people listening to this. And there is a scribe writing all this down as you would have in any courtroom and so on. And every word is being recorded. And, this is like a really good opportunity to speak publicly and to speak to the people who are interested in these sort of things.
Is Luke in the room or did he?
He's in the room. He's in the room. We know that he's in the room. Yeah. Because he was with him in Jerusalem. Because we've in the last chapter he mentioned we, so it means that Luke stayed with him. Yeah, but maybe Luke wasn't. Okay, maybe he wasn't there, but he sort of, if you remember, that he gathered all the accounts when Luke starts writing his gospel. If you remember, that many have tried to write an account of the things that have happened. Remember, I'm just going to read you the first chapter, the first few lines from the Gospel of Luke. Inasmuch as many have taken in hand to set in order a narrative of those things which have been fulfilled. So many is not two, is not three. We have 4 Gospels, which isn't many, or let's say, if you don't count Luke's, if you don't count, so John's gospel was written the latest, so probably around the year 100. So by that time you had Mark and Matthew and Mark, and then Luke is writing, but Luke doesn't say there were 2. He says there were many. So many people have been writing about this, and we know that Luke collected and gathered all these evidences. So not sure if Luke is here. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But we know that he was sort of collecting all these writings and testimonies and so on. All right. Then Agrippa said to Paul, okay, so Paul says, Paul said, I would to God that not only you, but also all who hear me today might become both almost and altogether such as I am, except for these chains. So Paul wants everyone to become Christian, of course. When he had said these things, the king stood up, as well as the governor and Bernice and those who sat with them, and when they had gone aside, they talked among themselves, saying, "This man has done nothing deserving of death or chains." Then Agrippa said to Festus, "This man might have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar." So you can see here, Paul, he's not doing himself a favor by appealing to Caesar, but Paul wants to go to Rome. That's why we said he wants to go to Caesar. He wants to go to Caesar. All right. Chapter 27. And when it was decided that we should sail to Italy. Now we can see that Luke is there because we can see here we. All right, Luke is writing this. And when it was decided that we should sail to Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to one named Julius, a centurion of the Augustan regiment. So entering a ship of Adrimatium, we put to sea, meaning to sail along the coast of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with us. And the next day we landed at Sidon. And Julius treated Paul kindly and gave him liberty to go to his friends and receive care. When we had put to sea from there, we sailed under the shelter of Cyprus because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea, which is off Sicilia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing to Italy, and he put us on board. So we see how they're sort of going along the coast of Mediterranean, around there. They sort of go to Cyprus, and then they catch another boat that will take them wherever is close, Alexandrian ship that's sailing to Italy. Okay. When we had sailed slowly many days and arrived with difficulty of Cnidus, the wind not permitting us to proceed, we sailed under the shelter of Crete of Salmon. Passing it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near the city of Lasea. Now, when much time had been spent and sailing was now dangerous because the fast was already over, Paul advised them, saying, okay, when fast was already over, this is the Hanukkah fast, because Hanukkah is in winter, so we know this isn't Passover fast. This is the fasting period. So Jews were fasting before Hanukkah, or it's mentioned in the New Testament as the feast of dedication. I told Protestants don't sort of put this as part of their Bible. The first Maccabean, where you have the Maccabean revolt, Judas the Maccabean rising against Roman authorities because they have desecrated the Jewish temple, made Jews to eat pork. They made a gymnasium out of the temple and made them run there naked and do whatever. And so they had to consecrate, or they had to rededicate the temple again, and that's called the Feast of Dedication, or Hanukkah today. And that's always in winter around Christmas time, and Jews were fasting. Hence, why do we fast before Christmas? So it's not something that Christians have invented. It's something that goes long before that. Okay. Paul advised them, saying, so they are in trouble. It's winter time. We see before the fast, so it's winter. No one is sailing across the Mediterranean or anywhere else during winter time. So that's Christmas time. The winds are heavy, and you would know why, because if you were to see their ships, you wouldn't either, all right? Because they were very, very unsafe. Okay. But then Paul advised them, saying, men, I perceive that this voyage will end with disaster and much loss, not only of the cargo and ship, but also our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion was more persuaded by the helmsman and the owner of the ship than by the things spoken by Paul. So Paul is sort of warning them, because Paul was journeying on boats for so many years, and he sort of had experience. We see him that he had these 3 missionary journeys already. This is why we sort of think that this is the 4th missionary journey, because he wanted to go to Rome, and that was his mission. This is one of the things why I said it's sort of debatable whether there was a 4th missionary journey, because if he didn't appeal to Caesar, he would be set free. But he intentionally appealed to Caesar because he wanted to go to Rome, because that was another opportunity for him to speak up publicly and to preach. Okay? So they're not listening to Paul. These people are sort of, they're continuing the journey. And because the harbor was not suitable to winter in, the majority advised to set sail from there also. If by any means they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete opening towards the southwest and northwest, and winter there. So they need to spend the winter somewhere. So they know that they can't sort of sail during winter, but they're now trying to decide where they will spend the winter. Okay. Verse 13, chapter 27, we continue. When the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their desire, putting out to sea, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after, a tempestuous headwind arose, called Euroclidion. So when the ship was caught and could not head into the wind, we let her drive. So the wind was too strong. They sort of let the sails down and they just let themselves go. Wherever the wind takes them, it's going to take them. They don't know. Now, they are now really in the hands of God. So they don't know where they're going. And running under the shelter of the island called Claudia, we secured the skiff with difficulty. When they had taken it on board, they used cables to undergird the ship. And fearing lest they should run around on the Syrtis sand, they struck sail and so were driven. And because we were exceedingly tempest-tossed, and the next day they lightened the ship. So we see here the wind and the waves are tossing them from one side to the other, and they just started throwing this cargo into the sea because they didn't know what to do. Okay, that was their only hope. On the 3rd day, we threw the ship's tackle overboard with our own hands. Now, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, So it means it was such a huge rain. So neither sun nor stars. It means it was heavily raining and the storm was there. And no small tempest beat on us. All hope that we would be saved was finally given up. So they lost even hope. They sort of knew this is going to end badly. But after long abstinence from food, then Paul stood up in the midst of them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me and not have sailed from Crete and incurred this disaster and loss." No, we know that this sometimes now Paul reminds them, "I told you. I did tell you not to go, and you haven't listened, all right?" But he wants to remind them that he sort of not just has experience, and something is about to happen. Pay close attention. "And now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For there stood by me this night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve, saying, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must be brought before Caesar. And indeed, God has granted you all those who sail with you.'" You see, it's also the will of God to take him to Caesar. All right, we see this here. But he's telling them this, "I told you so," not because he wants to prove them that he's right. He wants to, this is another opportunity for him to sort of be a missionary among them. He's telling them, "An angel of the Lord to whom I serve appeared to me, and he said, no lives will be lost, but the ship."
So if that verse is like that clear that God wanted him to convert the emperor, why do some people think that it maybe was not meant to be or whatever? Yeah.
Because you don't look holistically at the history of the church. We look just particularly, if you just focus on the Bible as a sola scriptura, then it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense how even the book of Acts ends.
But even that verse just there was like really clear to me that obviously it was in God's will. Like it literally said the angel told him.
Right.
Like even sola scriptura should understand that. Like,
yeah, that's right. That's why there is a debate whether this was a fourth missionary journey. But it will take some time, I guess, to because certain things are even being archaeologically discovered even now, and they become very clear even to the Protestants that what the church has been practicing for these centuries and centuries. Only if you're blind, you're not going to receive this. Okay. So it takes some time, I guess, on both sides, and some patience and love and understanding, all these things that we lack of. All right. So and so he's saying, "Take heart, men, for I believe God, that it will be just as I was told, as it was told me. However, we must run aground on a certain island. Now when the 14th night had come, 14 nights, so it's 14 days, all right, had come, as we were driven up and down in the Adriatic Sea." So they're now in the Adriatic Sea, so close to Serbia. so Adriatic Sea is that sea between Italy and sort of Serbia, Croatia now, and Montenegro, that sort of. They thought they were in the Adriatic Sea. Okay, that's very important because we'll see where they are actually. About midnight, the sailors sensed that they were drawing near some land, and they took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they took soundings again and found it to be 15 fathoms. So what's this? This means they took a rope, tied something heavy, and they let that rope down to sink. And they were measuring it. So first they measured, they said it was 20, there is 15. So it becomes more shallow and shallow. So it means they're approaching to some land, all right? All right. Then, fearing lest we should run aground on the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come, because it was in the middle of night. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship, when they had let down the skiff into the sea, under pretense of putting out anchors from the prow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved." Then the sailors cut away the ropes and the skiff and let it fall off. And as day was about to dawn, Paul implored them all to take food, saying, "Today is the 14th day you have waited and continued without food, and eaten nothing. Therefore I urge you to take nourishment, for this is for your survival, since not a hair will fall down from the head of any of you." So we see these people are very hungry. They were keeping this little food that they had on board, because we've seen earlier that they're throwing this cargo, they're throwing even food into the sea, only to be saved, if they could. So for 14 days they haven't eaten nothing. Paul now, they're starting to listen to Paul. They listen to Paul, and they say, Paul says to them, "Okay, 14 days has gone. Take this food, because we're going to be saved." All right. And when he had said these things, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of them all. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. You see this? This is the Eucharist. Paul is celebrating the liturgy, the Eucharist. It's very clear language. He took the bread, broke it, and gave it. But no, it didn't say that he gave to all, by the way. It does not say he gave the Holy Communion to everyone on the boat, all right? And then they were all encouraged and also took food themselves. So this is a difference. He took the bread, broke it, and gave it to them. And you see here verse 36, and also took food themselves. So this bread that was broken was the body of Christ. This is the liturgical bread. This is the Holy Communion. Only for Christians, because it does not say that he gave it to pagans and all of those who were on the ship. And we will see that there were about 200 people on that ship. All right. You'll see. And in all, listen now, the next verse. And in all, we were 276 persons on the ship. All right. All right. So 276 people on that ship. He didn't give communion to everyone. He's celebrating the communion. He's celebrating the Eucharist, celebrating the liturgy. Very, very important thing. All right. So when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship and threw out the wheat into the sea. Now they trust Paul so much. They're even throwing food into the sea. When it was day, they did not recognize the land, but they observed a bay with a beach, onto which they planned to run the ship if possible. And they let go an anchors and left them in the sea, meanwhile losing the rudder ropes, and they hoisted the mainsail to the wind and made for shore. But striking a place where two seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the prow stuck fast and remained immovable. But the stern was being broken up by the violence of the waves. And the soldiers' plan was plan was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim away and escape. But the centurion, waiting to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land, and the rest, some on board and some on parts of the ship, and and so it was that they all escaped safely to land. We see everyone is safe. I mean, Paul did say not a hair from your head will fall off. This is not to mean, it doesn't mean literally, all right? So, of course, the hair from their heads has fallen off, but yeah, they're all saved. All right, 9 o'clock. We've got one more chapter, and we're going to wrap this up. Okay. Now, when they had escaped, they then found out that the island was called Malta. You know what Malta is? All right, on the other side of the Adriatic Sea. And the natives showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and made us all welcome because of the rain that was falling and because of the cold. But when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened on his hand. So when the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, "No doubt this man is a murderer, whom though he was escaped the sea, yet justice does not allow to live." So we see what pagans' sort of ideology is. And we have that many in our culture as well. I know, especially in Serbian culture, they would say, "Oh, sudbina, that's destiny." So what they believe, sort of, this man just survived a shipwreck. So his destiny was to be killed. So he came on land, we welcomed him, and now the word viper here means a snake, but the word viper is used because it was a venomous snake. All right. So now a venomous snake is there around his hand. He can't escape death. So a viper or a snake bit Paul, and that's it. And that's so what was their belief again? You have a destiny and you're meant to be killed or die on a certain day. And you can't escape your destiny. That's it. So he was meant to be killed in this shipwreck. He somehow survived, escaped his destiny, but you can't escape destiny. Karma is, what comes around goes around. And so now, here he is, a snake has gotten him. That's it. So that was purely and you have many people believing in the same thing today. Let's see what's going to happen. Look. Verse 5, but he shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. So you see, Paul is great, all right? However, they were expecting that he would swell up and suddenly fall down dead. So they sort of thought, oh no, he has to die.
They're just hoping he's going to
Yeah, because that's their belief. Yeah. The belief is, this man's just survived a shipwreck. He's meant to die.
But all the rest of them, they all survived the shipwreck.
Yeah, but this man, he's a special sinner. He's a special sinner. It's his day to die. It's his destiny. He has to, this is meant to be. This is what people say. Oh, it's meant to be. It's what it was meant to be. Rubbish. All right. There is no destiny. There is no meant to be things. Okay. There's nothing like that. And this event proves that. However, but after they had looked for a long time, so they're sort of staring at Paul, waiting for him to drop dead. Okay, but after they looked for a long time, and so no harm had come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. So he escaped the shipwreck. He survived that. He survived the bite of a venomous snake. He must be a god. There is no other explanation. Like, there is nothing else can explain this. Can I please get a glass of water? So they changed their minds and said he was a god. Of course, Paul didn't say, yes, I'm a god, because we know earlier when he was also in Athens and in Ephesus and so on, when they declared him to be a god, we remember from the same book of Acts that he says, no, I'm not a god, please. All right. In that region, there was an estate of a leading citizen of the island, whose name was Publius, who received us and entertained us courteously for 3 days. And it happened that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever and dysentery. Paul went in to him and prayed, and he laid his hands on him and healed him. So when this was done, the rest of those on the island who had diseases also came and were healed. They also honored us in many ways. And when we departed, they provided such things as were necessary. So we see Paul has performed a miracle, I'm not going to talk about miracles. Miracles happen even today. It's not something people say, oh, well, the time of miracles is long gone. This is, only in the New Testament and so on. I hear this many times. We have this in the Orthodox Church, like we're sort of looking for miracles. I know, like once in a while you will have, a certain icon would start gushing myrrh. You have this phenomenon in the Orthodox Church, like myrrh gushing icon, or And there was one bishop in, I know that I'm not going to say names and so on, but a priest is calling a bishop and says, "Oh, Your Grace, I've got this icon in the church, and the myrrh keeps gushing out of it. So it's a sweet smelling perfume, oily substance that sort of flows out of the icon." And we don't sort of pay attention. And so the bishop was listening to a priest and so on, and the bishop said, "Father, you're serving the divine liturgy every Sunday. And every Sunday, in front of your very eyes, the bread and wine become body and blood of Christ. And yet you never called me because of that. Why are you calling me because of this?" So yes, miracles happen every Sunday, every liturgy. After 3 months, we sailed in an Alexandrian ship whose figurehead was the twin brothers, which had wintered at the island. And landing at Syracuse, we stayed there 3 days. From there, we circled round and reached Rhegium. And after one day, the south wind blew, and the next day, we came to Puteoli, where we found brethren and were invited to stay with them 7 days. Okay, you see, in some Puteoli, they found brethren. Who's that? So this is a common expression when they found fellow Christians. When they find fellow Christians, they're going to call them brothers and sisters, brethren. There they found brethren. You see, from the time of Stephen's martyrdom in Jerusalem, we see that Christians and apostles have went from Jerusalem. One party has gone to India. We know Thomas also went there. So 70 apostles spread across the globe. So some ended up here, all right, in the middle of nowhere, as we've seen earlier in Tyre and Sidon as well. So here we know that the last sentence of John's Gospel was, if we are to tell the story, everything that Jesus did and said, if we were to write it, the world could not contain all the books. So we're not just following one story, but there is many stories that were not recorded about how the Word of God and how Christian faith was spreading across the globe. So Paul is coming here with Luke and other disciples, and they found brethren. Okay, so they're already there. All right. We stayed there 7 days. And so we went toward Rome. And from there, when the brethren heard about us, they came to meet us as far as Appii Forum and three inns. When Paul saw them, he thanked God and took courage. Now, when we came to Rome, the centurion delivered the prisoners to the captain of the guard, but Paul was permitted to dwell by himself with the soldier who guarded him. So Paul wasn't in the prison. He was kept by himself, all right? And it came to pass after 3 days that Paul called the leaders of the Jews together. So when they had come together, he said to them, "Men and brethren, though I have done nothing against our people or the customs of our fathers, yet I was delivered as a prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans, who, when they had examined me, wanted to let me go." Okay, they wanted to let me say this very, very openly. They wanted to let me go because there was no case for putting me to death. But when the Jews spoke against it, I was compelled to appeal to Caesar. Not that I had anything of which to accuse my nation. For this reason, therefore, I have called for you to see you and speak with you, because for the hope of Israel, I'm bound with this chain. The hope of Israel. What was the hope of Israel? The entire history of Israel was they're hoping for what? For the Messiah to come. The hope of Israel is that Messiah will come. And for this hope, Paul says, that I'm bound with this chain. So he's calling for Jewish leaders. They are coming to him and they're listening to him. As always, whenever Paul goes to any sort of city we've seen, this is the same pattern repeating. Then they said to him, listen what they say, "We neither received letters from Judea concerning you, nor have any of the brethren who came reported or spoken any evil of you. So we know nothing about you." Like, really? Like, we neither received letters, we know about you, but we don't know, we received nothing from Judea. Okay? And no one has spoken anything bad about you. But we desire to hear from you what you think. For concerning this sect, we know that it is spoken against everywhere. So they've heard about Christians. Christians are already in Rome, and they've heard about it, and they want to hear about it. So when they had appointed him a day, many came to him at his lodging, to whom he explained and solemnly testified of the kingdom of God, persuading them concerning Jesus from both the law of Moses and the prophets, from morning till evening. And some were persuaded by the things which were spoken, and some disbelieved. So when they did not agree among themselves, they departed after Paul had said one word. The Holy Spirit spoke rightly through Isaiah the prophet to our father, saying, Go to this people and say, Hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and not perceive. For the hearts of this people have grown dull. Their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them. So we see here Paul has been speaking to them. Some believed, some disbelieved, and there arose an argument, as was the case wherever Paul was, in Ephesus, in Thessaloniki, in Athens, wherever he went, this was the same thing. Therefore, let it be known to you that the salvation of God has been sent to the Gentiles, and they will hear it. And when he had said these words, the Jews departed and had a great dispute among themselves. And then Paul dwelt 2 whole years in his own rented house. All right. So Paul dwelt 2 years. He rented a house for himself in Rome. All right. He had a great time, and and received all who came to him, preaching the kingdom of God and teaching the things which concern the Lord Jesus Christ with all confidence, no one forbidding him. So he turned to the Gentiles, and I'm turning your attention on the first chapter, how Luke starts. Because you don't find here in the book of Acts how Paul was martyred. So we know that Paul was killed actually in Rome, as well as Peter. All of the apostles were martyred, as in the same sort of manner as they were stoned, but Peter was crucified upside down. Paul was killed in Rome, and so on. Everyone but one. Do you know who?
John.
John. Yes, John was the only one who he was exiled. He didn't have a great time, because the island of Patmos was actually a salt mine. So he was suffering a lot there.
And that's where he got revelation.
Right? Yes. And on that very place is a monastery, still the monastery of St. John the Theologian.
So John, he's the one as well who was told by Jesus that he could have been the only one that never dies. Something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But he says there, he did not say that I will never die.
Yeah, but he says to them to kind of show that, I guess, that Jesus can choose who he wants to.
Yeah. If I want, yeah, that's right. I could say, but he did not say that he's not going to die, because he was so young. If you pay attention to the Orthodox iconography, and usually you can see John beardless totally, so he was like 17 years of age. Like he was the youngest disciple. So it's not illogical when there is this internal logic of the book that Luke writes, the book of Acts, before that the Gospel of Luke, as we call it, which is Jesus began both to do and to teach, and this is being continued in his disciples, through his disciples, and Paul is now in Rome. The word has finally reached Rome, and it will be fulfilled on today's date, actually, because today we celebrate Saint Constantine and Helen, the Divine Crown emperor, who was, and in the hymn of Saint Constantine today, we sing to that as Paul you have received the vocation not from men, a calling, not vocation, a calling not from men. That's why I put on Bible studies group yesterday afternoon that in the Troparion, which is the main hymn of today's day, that Constantine received a calling not from men in the same way as Paul. So what Paul has begun in Rome was fulfilled on 250 years later through Constantine when he granted freedom and stopped 250 years of persecution of Christians through Constantine, whom we celebrate in the Orthodox Church today, and his mother Helen, who found the true cross in Jerusalem as well. Paul's goal was to go to Rome to preach to Caesar. It will be fulfilled in not in Paul's time, but in God's time. Through Constantine, it was fulfilled that that the persecution has stopped. Constantine has organized the first ecumenical council, the Council of Nicaea, and they agreed upon the creed that we still confess, the Nicene Creed, and that's only thanks to Constantine, because if it wasn't for Constantine, we would never have the Nicene Creed. Constantine was a great ruler. We celebrate him today because he he knew the importance of councils. He was a great emperor. He was the sole emperor, the first sole emperor to rule the whole empire, because the empire was divided in Eastern Empire and the Western. There was the first tetrarchy in times of Jesus, and then it was split into two parts, the eastern and the western part of Roman Empire. But then Constantine defeated Licinius at the Milvian Bridge in 312, and then in 313 he became the sole emperor of the entire Roman Empire, all the way from the British Isles to to down to Egypt, and all the way to east towards what's now Iran, Iraq, sort of Persia. That's right, all the way to Persia. So it was by far the greatest empire that ever existed, pretty much. And we still benefit out of the, as I said, legal system of Rome, Latin language that's sort of embedded in. If you want to study medicine, you have to know, all the body parts and organs in Latin, and all the way up. So it's still like and I would like to say we live in Australia, so far from Rome, but still Rome. Uh, Still the legal system, how we have, we have this Westminster system of governance. That's basically Roman system of governance, where you have districts and their representatives in the parliament, and you had the Senate in Rome, and we still have the Senate, and so on and so forth. So it's very much embedded still in our society. And if it wasn't for Constantine, who was wise enough to sort of, he favored Christian religion. He was baptized on his deathbed, by the way, when he was dying. But it was a custom at that time to postpone baptism, because they believed, oh, well, I can't have any sins after baptism. Um, so so he was baptized at his deathbed, organized many councils, and one of the most important is the Council of Nicaea, and brought peace, pretty much brought peace into, and built Constantinople. He built a new capital of the Roman Empire, Constantinople, the city that's still very much alive. And that's the first city that was built as a Christian city. So Rome was a pagan city, and they had to convert all the pagan buildings, like even in Athens, for example, the Parthenon, the famous Parthenon that we have today, would never have made it until our times if it wasn't for church. Parthenon was longer a church than it was a pagan temple. Parthenon served for about 1,500 years as a church. So from about 5th century until the 19th century, Parthenon was a church dedicated to Parthena. Parthena is the Virgin Mary. The Virgin, Parthena means the Virgin. So it was dedicated to the Virgin Mary. For 1,500 years, Parthenon, if you go to Athens even now, please bear in mind That stands there because it was a church, first and foremost, because Christians have preserved that and haven't destroyed it and used it as a sacred temple, by the way. And also in Rome, the whole Rome pretty much was preserved because of Christians. Christians haven't destroyed that. They converted that into churches and sacred spaces and so on. But Constantinople was actually built from the very ground as a Christian city. And still everything cries out. If you can go to Istanbul, even though it's Turkish, everything cries out. From every corner it screams so that it's a Christian. Everywhere is an engraved cross, engraved Greek letters, and all of that. And if you see Hagia Sophia, it's one of the world miracles. It's, you can put veils around it and hide the iconography and beautiful mosaics. It's Christian.
Why would Muslims like living there then if there's something like Christian stuff?
Well, because they believe that this greatness was entrusted to them, like that God has given this to them. Like when Mehmed the Conqueror enters into Constantinople, he thanks God for granting him this greatest city in the entire world, because it was in the 15th century. There was nothing like that anywhere in the world as Constantinople was. Even though for centuries it was degrading and degrading, but still these major mega structures, mega buildings were still there. The Senate, the Hagia Sophia, greatest monasteries and courtrooms and stadiums, all of that was there still.
What's the Turkish Orthodox Church like? Are they Coptic or something?
It's not Turkish Orthodox Church, it's the Greek Orthodox Church. It's the Patriarch of Constantinople still that resides there, and he's first among equals in the Orthodox Church. So if you go to any Greek church here in so if you walk to the Holy Cross Church here in Stewart Street in Wollongong, you will see it's written actually Holy Cross Greek Orthodox Church, Archdiocese of Australia, Patriarchy of Constantinople. So they're directly under Constantinople. Well, not directly, but yeah, they're directly under Constantinople. Other churches have their self-governance, but according to the canon law of the Orthodox Church, the Patriarch of Constantinople is the first in honor. So like Rome, yes, but canon law of the Orthodox Church says Rome is the first, then Constantinople. It was never like Rome was. It's sort of the Fourth Ecumenical Council, and there was many debates about the sixth canon of the Fourth Council. What does it mean? And giving equal honor to Constantinople and to Rome and so on. And it's very debatable. But what's not debatable is that Hagia Sophia is the cathedral church of all Orthodox Christians. That church has given birth to all of us. Whoever is an Orthodox Christian has a cathedral church, like a mega cathedral church. And that's Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. And I don't know whether this is recorded or not, because I'm going to say something political here. I don't care, because you have this dispute, this contemporary dispute between Moscow and Constantinople, because Constantinople has recognized autocephality or independency of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and then Moscow has this, rightly so, objecting to Constantinople interfering to their own sort of jurisdiction. And what Moscow has done was outrageous. They have stopped communion with Constantinople. Like, you can have, like, this is outrageous. And then because the Russian church is so powerful, because it's the most numerable Orthodox church, like it has 150 million Orthodox Christians, and it's so rich and so powerful that you see this sort of imposing their own agenda on other Orthodox, disregarding the canon law of the Orthodox Church, which, despite Constantinople being called Istanbul, And despite the fact that there is only 3,000 Orthodox Christians in Istanbul now, that church is still the first church among equals in the whole Orthodox world. And it is the first, which is very moving and emotional for me. First, because it's the first in martyrdom. That church is the first persecuted church. Christian church, Christian religion, if you want to, is the most persecuted religion nowadays. That is a pure fact.
Of all time, I think. Would it be?
Well, I don't know about all time, but now, in the 20th century, and even now, it's the most persecuted religion in the world. I'm talking about nowadays, contemporary. What happened in the Crusades, what happened before. I'm not going into that, but definitely now is the most not in Australia so much, or the Western world, but even so, the Western world chooses not to, like, you will not hear this on news in Australia or in America or anywhere else. But Christians are persecuted. When you go to Middle East, that's where Christians are. When you go to Egypt, anywhere, Christians are being killed only because they're Christians, nothing else. Anyways, just to go back to that Constantinople thing, according to canon law, that is the first church, and it's the first church by martyrdom. By martyrdom, that church has been suffering so much that it deserves, like Rome has been suffering so much for 250 years. Millions of martyrs you have in Roman catacombs and being martyred and spilled their blood only because they were Christians. You have that happening right now happening in Constantinople. Everything taken away from that church. Their cathedral, their monasteries, their possessions. As much, I've been talking to Greek people here. The last persecution happened in 1970s. And you still have, if you go to Constantinople, to Istanbul, Turks, who are sorry because their Greek neighbors and friends were exiled. They had to leave Constantinople. And they were the best traders, craftsmen, bakers, you name it. But they brought this beautiful food to Australia and America, I guess. Anyways, you can find me biased, maybe, but I'm sort of trying to be on the right path when it comes to canon law of the Orthodox Church, which is very clear when it comes to that. It doesn't matter who's more in power and who's got more numbers. What matters is the continuity of the church.
You say Russians more powerful.
Absolutely, they're the most powerful. They have 150 million people behind them. They're very, very powerful. They're the most powerful, the strongest church in the world amongst all the Orthodox. And they support the persecuted church, and they do much good. But power has that sort of two faces.
So how is that possible that they're not in communion with do you say it was the
Constantinople? Yeah.
church?
Well, they've forbidden that's the decision from 5 years ago, when Constantinople gave autonomy to the church in Ukraine. That created a schism.
Because of the Ukraine-Russian war?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Where Moscow said, we're not. So the patriarch. So usually, if you were to go to the liturgy celebrated by the patriarch, any patriarch in the Orthodox Church, you have the patriarch of Serbia, Porfiria. On the great entrance, when the priest goes with the holy gifts, with the chalice and paten through the church, and he faces the people at some point and says, "Oh, remember, O Lord, this, our bishop, remember, O Lord, this, remember the suffering, the captives, and all of you and all Orthodox Christians, may the Lord God remembers in his kingdom." Well, I always commemorate the name of my bishop.
Yeah.
When the bishop serves the liturgy, on that very spot, the bishop would say, "Remember, O Lord," he would commemorate the name of the patriarch. When the patriarch serves the liturgy, he would commemorate all the patriarchs in the whole world.
He would name them all?
He would name them all. There isn't many.
It's probably off like 4 hours.
No, yeah. But we have 17 autonomous churches. But the patriarchs all only commemorate the patriarchs, which is no, there isn't. I have to count how many because you have Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem, Moscow, Belgrade, Romania, Bulgaria. You have 8 patriarchs. So they would commemorate 8 patriarchs. Oh, you have Georgia, the patriarch of Georgia, 9. Georgia has a patriarch as well. Yes, that's right. It's a beautiful country. One of my friends just went there, actually. So 9 patriarchs. Then you have archbishops, because you have Archbishop of Cyprus, which is traditionally autonomous church, self-governing church. You have Archbishop of Sinai, which is in Egypt, and you have Metropolitan of Poland and Polish lands and Czech lands, and you have Autonomous Church of Japan, of America.
In the Eastern countries as well.
Well, we would name all Eastern European countries. Yeah, this is now going into history, and so I know we've been here for a long time.
What makes when do they decide what countries we're going to have patriarchs and what we're going to have the second?
Historically, that has been going on for. So Serbia has actually gained the rank of by the rank of patriarchs before Moscow, but because we had this, and this was 14th century.
Yeah.
So Serbia has become a patriarchy, got its first patriarch in 14th century, and then Moscow in the 15th century. And then we all went under Ottoman rule for about four centuries.
Well, you said the Moscow patriarch has only started from the 15th century.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
That's pretty modern, I guess. I would think that
Yes.
the church would be much older.
Yes, and that's why. Well, they are older. I mean,
Yeah.
you have Saint Cyril and Methodius from the 9th century preaching, and Prince Vladimir, who came to Constantinople to receive baptism, not to receive. He sent a delegation to Constantinople, and then the delegation from Constantinople was sent to Prince Vladimir, the first self-governing prince of Russia.
Yeah.
The delegation was sent from Constantinople and was baptized. They were baptized by Orthodox, but they had metropolitans. So you have this honorary title. So you have a bishop, metropolitan, archbishop. So they had their own metropolitans, but as the Roman Empire declined, or the Eastern Roman Empire, what we call Byzantium, declined, then these self-governing nations said, "Oh well, we want to be patriarchy as well." So when Constantinople first fell under Ottomans in the 15th century, then others have started climbing and claiming for themselves to be patriarchs. So that's pretty much, that's called the heresy of ethnophilatism. Ethnophilatism means putting the ethnos, or your own nations, before Christ and before Christianity. And I said that's the biggest, gravest sin of our Orthodox Church. Yes, the Orthodox Church has given us identity to the Orthodox nations like Serbia, Bulgaria, Russia, Romania, all these, Greece. You can't find a Greek or Serbian or Russian person identifying as Russian and not to be Orthodox at the same time. So much has this shape in our identity that, you got a Serbian person who never comes to church will always say, "Oh, I'm Orthodox," but he's never at the church. He doesn't fast. He doesn't go for confession. He doesn't receive communion, because the church has shaped his identity so much so that he can't distinguish between Serbian and Orthodox.
Yeah.
All right. So the church has played this, because the church has this role to sanctify everything, to sanctify every part of our lives, which is beautiful. So it's not just, religion is this separated thing from who I am as a citizen, or who I am in my personal life, in my private life, in my career life, in my professional life, in my family life. No. You're a Christian with your whole being. Like, we sanctify the flowers, the wheat, the grape, the field, the orchard, everything. Like, we bless, and that was done for centuries and centuries. We go and bless the water and so on. You asked me, what's this when you texted me, what's this on the ocean? We bless the water for theophany, and we have swimming and so on. So everything is being blessed, like everything is being included in this great mystery of salvation and transformation. Yeah, everything is from God. Yeah. So it's not a surprise that you have these people who have got nothing to do with the church to claim that they are Christians, Orthodox Christian. And then I have said, no, you're no Christian whatsoever because I know you, I haven't seen you, you're not doing this, and so on. And then I have to say, well, yeah, it does hurt them. It does hurt them. But I say, look, God can make children of Abraham from these stones. I quote that what John the Baptist said, because this is the church of John the Baptist. Yeah. Like he said that, like God can make the children of Abraham from stones. Don't say we are the children of Abraham, yeah. Because that was the trap of Jews.
Yeah, yeah.
We've got Abraham as our father. Shut up, do it. Like. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Anyways, any more exhortations, questions, or anything like that?